Hello, everybody. I hope you can see and hear us clearly. My name is Richie, and I will guide you through the next hours. Before I start doing that, I would like to ask you if you can mute yourself or if you can make sure you are muted, because that sometimes causes a bit of a background noise, which we try to avoid. It won't be me talking about nutrition today. For that topic, we have Robert Gorgos with us. Robert is head of nutrition at Bora Hansgrohe, a German World Tour cycling team, so the first league of cycling. He's also responsible for football teams of the first national league in Germany, and also deeply involved in a lot of the MNSTRY products. Before Robert starts his presentation, one more thing from me. If you guys have any questions during the presentation, feel free to write them into the comment box. I will go through them, pick a few, and we try to answer as many as possible after the presentation. That's it from me for now. Robert, the stage is yours.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about nutrition and training camp today. I'm also super excited that we have a lot of listeners tonight, and I hope the Sunday 5 o'clock or 5:30 appointment is okay for everyone. We chose this one because we thought it might be a good one, especially if you want to train on Sunday, and maybe it's better than during the week. But you can also write it in the comments if this is a good date and a good time, and we can also adapt or change it. Yeah, topic today. I think it's relevant right now. We have mid of March, and a lot of athletes plan a training camp in Mallorca, for example, or in Spain or in Italy. And I think it's quite interesting to talk about nutrition, what to do and what better not to do. Of course, like all the time with nutrition, or every time with nutrition, there's no absolute yes or absolute no. It's always depends, and we just try to cover the most important points. And like Richie said, thanks for the introduction, by the way. Yeah, we can discuss after. You can ask your questions, and I hope at the end everyone knows more than before, and you can have your questions answered. Let's start with some basic points. What is different in a training camp? When we're not talking about professionals, for them, maybe a training camp is more for like meeting their teammates and making some media appointments and talk to other trainers and, for example, nutritionists. But for most of us who are working normally in a normal 9-to-5 job, for example, a training camp is a very special situation. So it's quite different to the normal training situation. I would say that 90 or even more % of us who are doing a training camp train more than at home. So therefore, the energy needs are also way higher. I will show you in a few examples what that exactly means, but of course, it's different to your normal training situation. For example, there's also some data in training science that shows that, for example, if you train, let's say 10 to 15 hours at home in a normal training situation, for sure it is possible for 2 weeks to train maybe almost double that amount, so 20 or 25 hours. And that's quite typical for training camp. For most of us who do a training camp, we choose a better weather or environment. We also mostly ride with friends or in groups, so it's different to what you do at home. And I think maybe the most important point, and that's why a training camp can make absolutely sense, is that you have more time. also for not only for training, but also for recovery. And you can try to do everything right. This covers sleep, stretching, maybe massage, of course, nutrition, and also training. I think in training you can make a lot of mistakes, but I think this should not be the topic for tonight. We talk about nutrition mainly, but I think a training camp is a very good example for 2 weeks of trying things, of doing everything that is in your hand right. I think that's very important. We will cover all those topics, and I hope you understand what I mean. Okay, I'll show you a typical training at home. Like I said, during the week the time is limited. Also, the daylight is limited. Maybe you train on the rollers or on your Swift or something. But typically, the training time is limited. I give you here an example of a 1 hour 45-minute controlled base training with zone 1 and zone 2. You see the analysis for a medium skilled rider, and the energy need is around 3,000 calories. And you see also here the recommendation concerning carbs, protein, and fats, and also the division of breakfast, training, nutrition, recovery, lunch, dinner, and snack. You can turn it also around, for example, if you train in the evening. But here I think the energy needs are easily met. I think it's probably harder to overeat on those days. It's harder to not overeat on those days. You see that the energy needs are higher than compared when you're not training, but still not super high. So you see 600 calories for breakfast. You support the training with 100 grams of carbs in the training. And then the main meals are also around 600 to 700 kilocalories. So not very big meals. This is also a good example for doing it right. Feed your training and watch the quality of your nutrients before and after training. How does it look in a training camp? Typical base ride. Also zone 1 and zone 2, same athlete, but he does or she does 4 hours and 5 hours and 45 minutes. So the energy needs are almost doubled. The energy always is a part of the training itself and also the basic metabolic rate. You see here in comparison that the basic metabolic rate in the second example, when you sit long on your bike, is a little bit lower. That's just how it is because you only calculate the time off the bike. But still, the energy needs are very high. You saw before it was a little bit over 3,000 calories. Now it's 5,400 kilocalories. And you see that if you wouldn't feed your training, or if you didn't feed your training, it would be quite hard to meet those energy needs. Other than that, if you feed your training well, here it's with almost 1,400 kilocalories that you fuel your training with. The meals around the training are bigger meals, but still possible to meet. So I think one typical scenario we often see in training camp situations with long trainings, that you feed well for breakfast, then maybe not so well in the training, maybe just let's say 600-700 kilocalories. Often we only have like half board, or often the hotel only serve half board. So maybe after the training you don't feed as well, feed again as well, and then a very, very big dinner is the result. And I think this is not recommended concerning performance on the bike, concerning recovery off the bike, concerning sleep. I think it's quite logical to divide the energy evenly through the day. This includes before training, during training, right after training, a lunch or a snack after training, a dinner, and maybe even a nighttime snack. You see the example here that makes absolute sense. I don't think it's super important to have exactly the amounts here. This is just an example. But with this software, you can see exactly what your energy needs are and how you should feed them. For us, if you don't want to track it like to the gram, I think it's just important to have carbohydrates after the training and avoid to concentrate the energy intake only at the dinner time. Also interesting is that the protein intake is not concentrated only at the dinner time, but is spread evenly through the day. Second example in a training camp, and this also shows why volume is the most important factor for energy need. This is a 3-hour training with intensity. You go up to VO2 max intensity. This is a lactate shuttle training, for example. So quite high intensity, but still the energy need is way lower than compared to the long, almost 6-hour training. You see it's a little bit over 4,000 kilocalories. The easy training in the home training situation was a little bit over 3,000 calories, and the long training was way over 5,000 calories. So again, here, if you did this in a training camp, it could also be a threshold training or other VO2 max intervals. It's not really important, but what you see here also, have a balanced breakfast before training, feed the training well, here with 80 grams of carbs per hour, have a shake afterwards, a snack or lunch after training, and avoid huge dinners, maybe even include a nighttime snack here also with some protein. And when you do it like this, it's quite easy to also watch the quality of the foods or the nutrients before and after training. So you don't have to depend on just bread and jam or so, for example, but you can really, for example, if you're at the hotel buffet, we will show a few examples later. You can really watch the quality, what you put in your body before and after training. So as a summary, the main reason, like I already said, for increased energy expenditure in training is volume. And that's also what separates us from the professionals. When you train 10 hours compared to 25 or 30 hours, the energy expenditure is way lower and is actually higher than when you don't train, but it's not that much higher. When you train 25 or 30 hours, it is a lot higher. So the main reason for increased energy expenditure is always volume. Like we saw, intensity also increases the energy expenditure, but still, I mean, when you train 6 hours, this is the main reason for the increased energy expenditure. Why is that so important? And why is it very important to watch your energy intake, to feed your training, to make sure that your carbohydrate stores are full, or for most of the trainings are full? When you have a lower carbohydrate availability before a session, for example, if you do a train low training, for example, then this can lead to increased protein breakdown and more or less just a higher risk for illness, especially upper respiratory illnesses, but also muscle microtrauma. It leads to more oxidative stress. It leads to more inflammation and can even lead to problems in your GI system. This is sometimes something we want. I mean, training is always stress, and your body reacts to the stress and adapts and gets stronger. But if you do this for every training, what can be quite typical for a training camp situation, that you just don't feed your training well, overeat at dinner time, don't sleep well, don't have your carbohydrate or glycogen stores filled up enough, that's something we often see, that people get sick, that people are susceptible for viruses or bacterial infections, especially colds, but also sometimes have problems with the GI tract. So I think it's very important to have an idea what is on the training plan, what is the expected energy expenditure, and how should you plan your energy intake around the training, before, during, after, like we saw before. So the immune system is also dependent on energy intake that matches the energy expenditure. How could you do this? Let's give an example. This is the athlete we saw before with the individual metabolic profile and his individual energy needs. This is something that could work in this example. Let's say this athlete does a training with 4 hours in a fat metabolism fat metabolism zone 1, and he adds 3 by 30 minutes of zone 2, so-called fat max training. This could be something that could be fed with 200 grams of carbohydrates for this 4-hour session, so 50 grams in average per hour. But one example how you could do this, I will show you in a second why this could make sense, is a so-called progressive fueling in easy long training sessions. So you would start with not 50 grams per hour, but start maybe with 20 grams. And in this case, also use energy source that is not quickly absorbed. So something like slow carb or an oat bar, or here like a porridge bar. In the second hour, you increase the energy intake to 40 grams carbohydrates. Could be then a switch to a bar, or even a faster digestible carbohydrate drink like Power Carb. And then in the third hour, you would increase the energy intake to 60 grams carbs per hour. Here, a combination of a drink and half a bar. In the fourth hour, you would even combine a gel with a carbohydrate drink, Power Cup here. So in sum, it's still 200 grams or 50 grams per hour, but you do this like in a progressive way. And this can make sense because at the beginning of the training, the glycogen stores are still full. And what you want to do with this training is that you simulate the fat metabolism. Therefore, a lower carbohydrate intake can make sense. At a later stage, the glycogen stores have been not depleted, but are lower. The fat metabolism is in full swing, like I would say. And just to avoid a huge energy deficit, like we saw in the examples before, you can increase the carbohydrate intake. This can lead to just better performance during the training session. This can avoid a huge energy deficit and a total depletion of glycogen stores, and therefore optimize recovery. And maybe one point that we sometimes neglect is that also the concentration is better in the latter part of the training. And you avoid crashes or even muscular problems. You just feel better, performance is better, you recover better, and you don't finish the workout totally empty feeling or super tired. And this is one strategy that you could try, for example, also in a training camp. What happens when you go too fast all the time? Same athlete again. the metabolic profile you see on the right side on the bottom left. So his FTP is around 300 watts, his fat max is around 200 watts, VO2 max is close to 400 watts. And you see, I think this is quite impressive, what happens when you always go too fast. You see the green curve and the red curve. The red curve is the fat amount that is used, and the green curve is the green graph is the carbohydrate use. What is typical for endurance sports, and this is not just for amateur riders, but also for professionals, that the harder you go, the higher the intensity, the more carbohydrates you burn. And this carbohydrate expenditure rises exponentially. So we see here that more or less after 250 watts for this athlete, the carbohydrate expenditure is higher than what is possible to get in your body per hour. So after 250 watts, this athlete burns more than 120 grams carbs per hour. And this is more or less the maximum uptake that is possible. So if this athlete always goes too fast, let's say here he would do training with 4 hours, mostly in zone 2 with 200 watts, where he burns already a lot of carbohydrates. We see at fat max, he burns almost 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And also adds a lot of tempo, what is quite typical. I mean, this doesn't hurt. You don't produce a lot of lactate. It's quite easy to do, but you burn a lot of energy and burn a lot of carbs. So when we see that the glycogen stores are quite limited, somewhere in the range of 400 to 500 grams, and you deplete your glycogen stores in every training, especially when you don't fuel well on the bike, then it's quite hard to recover from those sessions. If you do it in a controlled way, right example here, 4 hours in zone 1 with 170 watts and 90 minutes in zone 2, then the carbohydrate need is lower. The amount of fat is almost the same that is burned. You have a great stimulus for your, in German we say Grundlage, or for your base. And you still burn a lot of energy, but it's a lot easier to recover from those sessions compared to the left ones. If you want to really do training, then I would recommend to do controlled base training in zone 1 and zone 2, or do intensity training in zone 4 or higher. Then you have the right stimulus for fat burning metabolism and carbohydrate burning metabolism. You also see here on the right side that with a lower performance level, it's still the same principle. So you see with the dots, the green dots and the red dots, that still the carbohydrate expenditure rises exponentially, and the fat burning metabolism, or the fat expenditure, goes down to almost zero. In this example, a little bit over 200 watts. So the FTP of this athlete is close to 220 watts. The fat max is only 140 watts. And I wanted to show you this graph because if those two athletes go together in a training group, the higher performant athlete might be under training, the other athlete might be overtraining. So it's quite important, especially when you ride in a group, you really stay in your individual training zones. If you don't, I think a training camp is just not productive. It's either over or under training. So it's very important to just look at those numbers, not only from a power point, but also from an energy point. So if athlete on the right side would do the fat max training with the athlete on the left side, he would burn a lot of carbohydrates, and it would be really hard to recover from those sessions. So how could carbohydrates look before and after training? I think for most of us, when we're not doing stage races or super hard trainings with a lot of zone 4 and zone 5, it's still possible to meet most of the energy needs, especially when you feed your training well with the options on the right side. So you can always look for high nutrient density. Opt for natural, real food, source of carbs like oats or porridge, potatoes, whole grain products, vegetables, fruit, something like sourdough bread, salads, but of course also pasta and rice. If you train a lot, this could be the case when you burn a lot of energy, for example, also in a training camp, then easier to digest carbohydrate sources and lower fiber options can be an option. Something like cornflakes, white bread, more dried fruit, soups, bananas, juices, something like muesli or rice and pasta as well. This is something you would also use, for example, in a marathon scenario, something when you prepare for a marathon like Ötztaler or so, the days before this race, when you want to fill up your glycogen stores without adding too much bulk or too much fiber, you would rather choose the options on the left side. In a normal training situation, you would rather opt for the options on the right side. In the training camp, it depends how much you train, how much you expend, how much energy you need. Also, what are the options on the hotel buffet? But still, when it's, for example, a rest day, you should for sure opt for the options on the right side. I created a little hit chart or so. This is my personal one. Of course, this is super individual, and you can always choose your own chart and fill it in with the things you know work for yourself. This is something that are nutrients that work for me and are also known to support immunity, support your microbiome, support the diversity of bacteria in your microbiome, help creating a healthy microbiome. I think this is a topic we can cover in another webinar, but we see more and more data that the microbiome is super important, either for performance, but also for immunity, for recovery, even for your mood or your motivation. So I think it's quite important to have some probiotic acting foods in your diet, something like kefir or natural yogurt or even aged cheeses, soy sauce, and also some prebiotics, special fiber like oats, onions, garlic, or broccoli. Let's go through the list. It's nothing special. I took care of choosing food that is available in any hotel and you can find on any buffet. Fish for sure is interesting because of the omega-3 fatty acids. So it also is included in the fat list. Chicken, turkey, sometimes maybe some red meat on easy days, or even chicken liver for a very good iron source, also including real vitamin A like retinol. Maybe on rest days, something like more bulky, more fiber containing, something like lentils or chickpeas. Like already mentioned, probiotics like yogurt, kefir, protein powder, choose whatever works for you. This could be part of a recovery shake, for example. Eggs are very interesting, especially for breakfast, and for sure also vegetables. We often forget that vegetables are also a good source of proteins. For carbohydrates, we already saw the list. Oats are super interesting and an evergreen in sports nutrition. When you're at home, find a good bakery that uses real sourdough and especially on easier training days, whole grain, rye or spelt bread. All kinds of fruit, especially berries, because they're also rich in secondary plant substances. This is the right charge that I called protection. but for sure also bananas or apples, pears, raisins, something like potatoes or sweet potatoes, and for sure rice, pasta, vegetables as well. What we often forget, especially when we train a lot and the energy expenditure is high, the carbohydrate expenditure is high, then carbohydrate drinks in training, like our drinks, slow carb in the first part of easy training, power or fast carb when you train a lot or higher in intensity, are highly recommended. From the fat side, I think it's important to for sure include some sources of monounsaturated fats like almonds, olive oil, avocados, olives, smaller amounts of saturated fatty acids like butter or even cheeses, and omega-3 fatty acids from walnuts or fatty fish, for example. I think fat is, or I don't think, it's for sure the nutrient with the highest energy density, so be a little bit careful to not use too much. If the energy expenditure is super high, like in a training camp scenario, for sure you can use a little bit more, something like olive oil or even nuts, but still it's quite easy to overdo fats, and maybe on the other hand don't eat enough carbohydrates. Like I already mentioned, important nutrients like protective agents you can find in things like onions, garlic, broccoli. They also are good sources of prebiotics or special fiber. Spices, fermented soy sauce as a probiotic source, herbs, green tea is interesting, also coffee, and like I already mentioned, berries and all kinds of vegetables. So create your own list. This is my list, but I think this is a good starting point. What can be a good example for foods to choose from the buffet? I just added a few examples that I found myself a few weeks ago in Spain. You can always find oats. There's always some fresh fruit. There's always yogurt. There's always soft-boiled eggs or omelets. 1 to 2 slices bread. You can choose the local bread. That's totally fine. It should also be a little bit of a vacation feeling, so it shouldn't be exactly what you do at home. Add a little bit of butter or nut butter and a teaspoon of honey or jam. And then the energy needs should be met. You have a good combination of nutrients like in fruit or probiotics like from the yogurt, proteins from the oats and the eggs, and carbohydrates from oats, fruit, yogurt, and the bread and the honey or jam. During the ride, I think we saw an example already, could be something like progressive feeding, but it all depends also on your performance level. Like you saw those 2 athletes, the one has just a higher threshold, has a higher fat max, therefore also burns more energy and more carbohydrates. So a good start, just as an example, could be 40 to 60 grams of carbs per hour for easier sessions and around 80 grams per hour for higher intensity sessions. Like we saw, an option is the progressive feeding in easy long sessions. And for most of us, training camps are typically high in volume. You want to increase your base level or your fat burning capacity. So the progressive feeding example is quite interesting for those training sessions. After the training, take care of the open window. A recovery shake totally makes sense. If you don't want to use a recovery shake, something like a yogurt with honey or so could also work. But I think, for example, our recovery shake is specially formulated. It contains high amounts of leucine, the most important amino acid for recovery, and also glutamine, the most important amino acid for your immunity. So I think those products make sense, and yeah, you help your body recover better, not get sick, and feel fresh again for the next day. Have also a carbohydrate dense option available. Could be something like a muesli with yogurt, could be some bread with some ham or cheese, maybe a little bit of salad or tomato, some fresh fruit, some berries. Please don't go super hungry to dinner. Have the carbohydrates when you can store them the best, and that this is directly after after your training. So for example, you could do like this. You take the recovery shake in the first 30 minutes after the training, maybe even before you take a shower. Then you rest a little bit, and within 60 to 90 minutes after the training session, you have a carbohydrate dense meal, like I mentioned already. And then 2 or 2.5 hours later, you go to the dinner buffet. And this I would always start with the soup and some bread, maybe add a small salad. If you can be sure that the quality of the fresh or raw vegetables is okay, and add some protein from fish or meat. Maybe if you train somewhere near the ocean, fish is quite interesting. And then you can add a normal and not super huge portion of rice or pasta with a light sauce, and maybe a small dessert. Also interesting for recovery, also for sleep, for melatonin production, a small nighttime snack with some slower digestible protein, something like skyr or high protein natural yogurt can make sense, with a spoon of honey or a few dates, and this helps you sleep and recover overnight. Maybe some points to also discuss in the discussion. People often ask me, or athletes often ask me, what about caffeine? What about alcohol? Because I know training camp is a special situation. You often go with friends. You often go in groups that you know from your club or so. So alcohol is quite common. I think when you really want to train and really want to get better, alcohol has no place in sports nutrition, because it definitely is detrimental to performance and also to recovery. But it also depends a little bit on the amount. If you have, let's say, half a glass of wine or a small beer, in most cases, it should not be super detrimental for recovery. But if you go high and go over this, then for sure, the training adaptation, the recovery from training, the training stimulus itself is lowered. And I would not recommend it at all. Caffeine, caffeine is a potent supplement, but for sure, the training camp should not be something like a race. So you should not be your best every day, or try to be your best every day. So the more you stress your body also with supplements like caffeine, the more stress it will be for your whole system. And I wouldn't for sure not overdo this, and save this, like caffeine gels, for example, for a race or a super high intensity training when you want to go super hard. And it's different to the normal training situation. All other supplements we can also discuss in another webinar, but I think that most supplements that you can find on the market can be dangerous. Sometimes you don't really need them. I would just mention 2 or 3 that can make sense. That is omega-3 fatty acids, especially when you don't like or don't eat a lot of fish. Sometimes magnesium can help you sleep, and maybe also helps a little bit with energy metabolism. And a good multivitamin, multimineral can also help with covering your basic nutrient needs. But when you feed well, when you watch the quality of your nutrition, in most cases, those 3 should be more than enough, if even you need those. Okay, conclusion. We have 40 minutes in the webinar. So how do you get the best out of the training camp? I think the most important thing is you need a plan. Not only a training plan that you should stick to, especially stick to your individual training zones, but also an idea of how to fuel those sessions. So plan your nutrition before the session. Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it shorter? Is it longer? How is my individual level? Is it higher? Is it lower? How much energy do I need? And how do I do this? So how do I do this before, during, and after the training? Make sure that you fuel your trainings. Like I said, for example, 40 grams as a starting point for easier session, maybe in a progressive way, starting with 20, then 40, then 60, then 80 in a 4-hour session, or individually can be a little bit higher or lower, depending on your performance level, but make sure that you have some energy on board during the training. Feed every 20 to 30 minutes, so spread the energy intake evenly through the session, especially when you want to do intervals. Start early to have the carbohydrates you want to burn, because you want to teach your body how to burn carbohydrates efficiently on board. Take some extra gels or bars with you. The gel 40, for example, contains 160 kilocalories, 40 grams of carbohydrates. And this can be a safer when the session is maybe longer than you were planning it, and you don't want to come home totally empty or super hungry. Like I already said, progressive fueling can be an option for longer rides. And also make sure, especially when you train in warmer regions, that you drink enough. Something like 1/2 to 3/4 of a liter per hour is a good starting point. After the ride, take care of the open window. I think the recovery shake, like I already mentioned, totally makes sense. Don't go super hungry to dinner. Have a carbohydrate-dense option available after the ride. Like I said, this could be a sandwich, this could be muesli. It's a good point also to include, for example, kefir here or some other probiotics. Include some fresh fruit. I think this is easy to find in any supermarket, and just make sure that you eat after the ride when you have the chance to replenish your glycogen the best. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to replenish the lost carbohydrates. And like I said, choose wisely from the hotel buffet. This could be more like the option 2. So include some fibrous food, include some fresh salad, include some cooked vegetables or vegetable soup, maybe some whole grain bread, and for sure some protein, for example, from fish. And maybe also make sure that you, especially when you train a lot, also have a nighttime snack. And this could be something like a yogurt or Greek yogurt with a spoon of honey and some berries or a little bit of fresh fruit. Okay, I think so far I covered the most important points. Maybe now it's time for the questions. Oops, I think.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Before we start with the questions, maybe one small thing from us, from MNSTRY. If you want to avoid mistakes with nutrition during training camp, and you want to try out some of the MNSTRY products, you can use the code you should see on the main screen now to get 20% off on the tasting box, which is like a tryout box, which contains some bars, some gels, or also carbohydrate powders or shakes. And whilst you're writing down the code, we can start with the first question, which comes from Rupert. I will present it to the main screen. If you didn't get the code, please type it in the comments and I will just show it again later. So Rupert wants to know, I think it was in the beginning of the presentation, when you talked about the example of the athlete and you showed those data from the track nutrition. And Rupert wants to know which software you use.
Yeah, this is a long time project for almost 5 years now. I started with a good friend of mine. It's Sentiero. So this is the performance software. You can find it online when you type in Analytics Sentiero. We still offer it for free. So you can pair your Garmin or Wahoo or even Hammerhead computer with the software. And then all your training data will be uploaded. You can also make performance tests and create a metabolic profile and then you see exactly how much energy, how many carbs, how many fats you burn. You can also get some recommendations from meals, like it was on the first charts. You can also fill in your personal foods you want to have. You can see tuned recipes, especially made for the energy need you expect for the training to come. So, like I said, it's called Sentiero, and yeah, feel free to try it.
I'm sure a few of us will give it a try. It wasn't a real question, but I find this point very interesting. It comes from Jens, and he complains that he can't take 4 bottles with him. He already got some tips from other viewers about like taking some powder in a plastic bag and put it in the pockets. But yeah, maybe I can add my own question here. Like I think for many athletes, it's quite normal to stop for a coffee stop to prevent yourself from like overfilling your pockets with a lot of bars and gels. And what is your advice here? Because I think a lot of athletes tend to overfuel on coffee stops and maybe eating too much too fast and not stay on a constant level of fueling.
Yeah, I think the example that someone mentioned, that you can take some powders with you, or you can even use a gel and use it, put it in the bottle and use it as a 40 drink. So you have 40 grams of carbs in the gel and put it in a bottle, and you have the energy in the bottle. So you have a tasty drink here as well. Is an option, but for sure in a training camp situation, especially if you do, let's say, 5 or 6 hours, a coffee stop, I would say in the latter part of the training, maybe after 4.5 hours, is totally okay. I mean, it always depends on what you choose. If you eat in Spain, you would say bocadilla, so a pretty fatty sandwich with lots of olive oil and cheese and ham. It might be a little bit hard to digest, and also not really promoting performance if you do some intervals or something. Yeah, but a light cake and a drink, maybe even some sweet drink and maybe an extra water to fill up your bottles is totally fine. Maybe just like I said, have a plan how much you want to have per hour, and yeah, do not eat nothing for 3 or 4 hours to wait for the coffee stop and then overeat, but have a plan for training and what you want to take in when.
I'm glad I can stop for a coffee and a bit of cake. Still in training. Next question comes from Tico. I don't know exactly how to spell it. He wants to know if you have any special advice for a vegan cyclist.
Yeah, so all our products are vegan. It's not because it's just made for those people, but we know that a lot of people do not want to have, for example, whey in a recovery shake. That's why we chose a vegan option. But for sure, it's quite important to take care of some special nutrients. So what is always an important topic is iron. So iron is just very well absorbed from animal sources, especially from red meat or liver, like I mentioned already. And for sure, also plant sources of iron exist, but the rate of absorption is a little bit lower compared to meat, and therefore iron status measured, for example, in your ferritin levels, in your, I hope I say that right in English, transferrin saturation is super important. So just make sure that those levels are good, because if those levels are, for example, are super low, then a lot of training does not make real sense. Good sources of iron from plants are dried fruit, are lentils, beans, oats, dark fruit, dark vegetables, especially in combination with vitamin C, because in plant sources, you increase from plant sources, you increase the absorption of iron by adding vitamin C. So if, for example, if you have a salad and then a lentil soup and then some whole grain and maybe some fresh herbs, you increase the iron absorption from those plant sources.
Okay.
Other important nutrients for vegans are omega-3 fatty acids. So make sure to have some walnuts, for example, or even algae or something that contain omega-3 fatty acids. And proteins are also a topic. So it could be a good idea. For example, I myself do this on most breakfasts. I add some recovery shake powder to my porridge to just have a complete protein. The combination of rice, pea protein, and the amino acids plus the oats and some fresh fruit and maybe some nuts is quite tasty and also is a complete protein source. So it contains all essential amino acids. And this can be a topic for vegan cyclists.
Sounds good. Next question is pretty interesting because I can imagine that some people thought it might be a typo. What's the difference between prebiotics and probiotics?
Yeah. So probiotics, I think we all know. These are the, for example, microorganisms that make the milk sour. So something you can find in yogurt or kefir, or even in sauerkraut or in soy sauce. So these are real microorganisms that, in the case, for example, of sauerkraut or fermented milk products, also survive the stomach acids and make it to your intestines and influence the microbiome in your intestine. Prebiotics are special fibers, like soluble fibers, for example, like beta-glucan in oats, for example, that help those microorganisms, those probiotics, grow better. They create an environment so those probiotics can act and grow where they need to act, like in the intestines. So the combination of prebiotics, fibers, especially in vegetables and whole grains, and probiotics can help with better microbiome, more diversity in your microbiome, and also better health in the end.
So we learned something about pre and probiotics now. I hope I can remember it in the future. Next question is about the ratio of glucose and fructose, which many brands use, like the 1 to 0.8. What's your opinion on this? Martin wants to know that.
Yeah, so if your goal is to go super high in carbohydrates, let's say 120 grams per hour, then this ratio makes sense because your glucose uptake is limited to 60 or a little bit more grams per hour. And if you want to have 120 grams per hour, you also need to take like Martin mentioned, the fructose transporter. On the other hand, if you only need 80 grams per hour, this is not needed. A lot of fructose is not necessary if you only want to have 40, 60, or 80 grams per hour. Then a 2-to-1 ratio, even a 5-to-1 ratio can work perfectly. What is interesting that when you use both transporters in all our products, we have some glucose and also some fructose. The glucose uptake is a little bit higher than 60 grams. So let's say it's 70, when half of this 70, let's say 35 grams, is ingested via the fructose transporter, then you have already over 100 grams. We are just working on new products and new drinks and new gels, chews, and we will also have some products with a 1-to-0.8 ratio, especially for those people who want to go higher than 100 grams per hour, let's say 120 grams per hour. In the typical training camp, where most of the training is, let's say, in the the base training zone and you opt for something in between 80 or maybe 100 gram maximum per hour, I think a 2-to-1 or even 3 or 4-to-1 ratio is totally fine.
Okay. The next question is about the holy grail from a few years ago, red beet juice. Overhyped or worth it?
Just try it. I mean, there is some data that suggests that beetroot increases blood flow, maybe increases oxygen transport in your whole system a little bit, but I don't think you will really feel it or something. We see some data, when I remember well, that for well-trained cyclists or runners, the effect is lower than for not as well-trained cyclists or runners. So the better you are, the less the benefit or the expected benefit might be. But for sure, it doesn't cause any harm. The nitrate, that's the ingredient that is worth trying and is part of the red beet juice, is the thing that helps or can help. Yeah, I think you can give it a try, and it's a natural product. There's nothing to say against it, and for sure it won't cause any problems or so. Creatine is maybe a different story. Creatine is interesting as well, especially for maximum force efforts like sprints or short bursts of high intensity, something in the range of seconds to maybe a few seconds to maybe 60 seconds or so. And when you want to support this system, when you do criteriums or you are a good sprinter and you have a lot of muscle mass and want to benefit from it, then you can give it a try. Yes, I would not use the same dosage like a strength athlete would do, like 5 or 6 grams or so. I would rather opt for something around 2 grams per day. And there's probably not a lot of problems. You won't gain a lot of water weight. You won't probably cramp more or so, what can happen when you use a lot. And it can make sense when your goal is to sprint better, for example. And leucine, I already mentioned it, super important for recovery. Part or added also to the recovery shake. We will also have, or is also added in the protein bars. So I think it's important. It's also part of most proteins, but when you're a vegan, leucine through those products, for example, can make sense, and you might feel it in a better recovery.
Okay, so that's it for supplements. We have a few questions on supplements in the chat. I think before we do that, maybe a very common question also is, like, when I go on training camp, many people also want to lose weight doing training camp because they train a lot. But you talked a lot about like getting in the food during a training camp. So is it helpful to try to lose weight during a training camp, or is this something you should focus on after or before the training camp?
Yeah, you more or less answered it already. I mean, the training load in a training camp is super high. The stress for your immune system is very high. So if you want to lose weight aggressively in those 10 or 14 days, that's a typical length of a training camp, that's quite dangerous. And sometimes, or I often see that people tend to get sick quickly after the training camp. And I think the most important thing is to avoid this, to get the most out of the big training stimulus you just put in your body. And therefore, I would not try to lose weight in a training camp. I think a slight energy deficit of, let's say, 300 to 500 kilocalories per day, or maximally 5, maybe 8% is okay. And you will not really feel it, and you will not harm your immune system, but trying to lose weight aggressively in a training camp, I don't think is a good idea. Like you said, just try to do it when you don't train a lot, especially in the base preparation phase. So now it's almost too late for the typical cycling season, but try to lose it slowly by creating a small energy deficit, and this over longer time. Can also be in the training camp, but really be careful with not making it this energy deficit not too big.
Okay, then maybe one more question about supplements. Iris wants to know about citrulline and arginine.
Yeah, so more or less it acts a little also like the red beet juice, so it increases blood flow and can help a little bit with oxygen transport. The database for like cyclists and professional or good endurance athletes is quite slim, I would say. So there's not something we can totally see why you would use this. I don't think it causes any problems or any harm, but I'm sure it's not a game changer or so. It's quite interesting that a lot of questions are about the supplements. I think this is my opinion. Please don't get me wrong. It's just my opinion. If you do all those things with training and nutrition, keeping your training intensity in the right range, eating the right food before, during, and after, taking care of your recovery with an open window, sleep well, maybe even taking a nighttime snack before sleep, the effect will be a lot bigger, I think, from day to day on a daily basis over a longer period than by using supplements or not using them. So I think just do the basic things right, and you will have a lot more benefit from it than taking supplements or not taking them. That's my opinion.
Okay, then maybe we have one more questions, which in the first seconds may sound a bit strange, but I think it's a very good question, because Josef wants to know, like, when he tries to fuel for the first hour of training, I guess he wants to know if he should take the 30 grams of carbohydrates like during after 30 minutes, after 45 minutes, or at the end of the first training hour.
Yeah, I would start depending a little bit on the intensity, but our examples were for low intensity training, so zone 1, zone 2. I would do the first 30 to 40 minutes without any energy intake, and then, like Richie already said, take those 20 or 30 grams of carbs after those 40 minutes. And then after 60 minutes, you just start with your routine. For example, 40 grams in the second hour, 60 grams in the third hour, and 80 grams in the fourth hour. And you can spread this energy evenly through this hour, so it does not really depend, do I take it exactly after 90 minutes or exactly after 105 minutes or so. Yeah, just go a little bit by feel, and just make sure that by the end of the ride, you have this energy that you were planning in your body.
Okay.
I see one more question that I would like to answer, because I think it's super interesting. How much protein per kilogram for optimal recovery? This is a very good question. And sometimes the protein is a little bit overhyped, and people think more help more, or more protein is better than less. But it also has it also comes with some problems, because protein makes you feel very full, and people tend to eat less carbohydrates when they eat a lot of protein, and therefore, have less glycogen in their body. The recovery is not perfect, and especially for higher intensity training, it is a problem. So if you want to have a number, I would say it should be in the range of between 1.5 and 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. This is a very general number, and it's important to also talk about protein quality here. So for sure, when you eat only vegan sources, for example, you need a little bit more than when you have also some animal sources of protein. But maybe a good starting point is to make sure that you have 20 to 30 grams of protein in every meal. So also in breakfast, also immediately after training, in the meal after training, for dinner, and maybe even as a nighttime snack. And then I'm sure, especially when you don't undereat and your energy deficit is not too high, this should work well for most of the athletes. If you train a very high amount, if you train like a professional, like 30 hours or so, then it might be a little bit higher, in the range of 2.5 grams or so per kilogram body weight. But also this is more than enough.
I think we have another very interesting one. Maybe just a quick answer. What about using table sugar for your training?
Yeah, the glucose to fructose ratio is 1:1, and we see from data that this is not a good ratio, because if fructose is too high, fructose is also quite high in osmolarity. So the more you drink, the more problems you might get. It tastes super sweet. So fructose always tastes sweet. And if you really want to have, let's say, 80 grams or so in a bottle, it's very, very sweet and doesn't taste very well. And like I said, the osmolarity, so the soluble parts in a solution is pretty high. So the water intake is slower than from a drink that has a lower osmolarity. So therefore, you can try it, but I would not recommend it as a performance carbohydrate drink.
I tried it when I was younger. I can't recommend, to be honest. It also hurts the teeth after a few hours, I have to say. Yeah. Then I would say we come to an end. Thank you very much for the nice questions. I've learned a lot, I have to say. And if I would do another training camp, I think I would do some things better now. Robert, any last words?
No, I think Richie, your words just hit the nail on the top, like we say in German. Just have a plan. Not only for training, but also for nutrition. And then I think the training camp can be a success. Don't overdo it. I don't think when you train 5 hours per week, then you can do a 25-hour week and don't suffer from it. So just have a plan here as well. And then I think training camp can be great, and also a big step in getting better.
Okay, that's it from us for now. See you in some of the other webinars we will have in the future, and have a great Sunday evening all, and eat your carbohydrates. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.